You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello everybody, back again here at Healing Voices Project. Today we're going to talk about a different topic. We're going to talk about traumatic brain injury, otherwise known as TBI. And I have somebody here who is an old friend who's certainly dealing with TBI on a very personal level, Sue Dexter. Sue, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. We've known each other for many, many years. Mm-hmm. We got started to know each other during the filming of the Jack Jonah movie. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, the Jack Jonah movie, Making Courage Courageous, we filmed here in the summer of 2019 about Jack Jonah, Kirk Jonah's son, who died of a heroin overdose in April of 2016. And that was quite a project, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
A blurry summer, huh?
Yes,
yeah.
And a lot of great connections.
Yeah.
We connected, a lot of people connected with that.
Certainly
project.
did. We really got the community together.
Mm-hmm.
Made a lot of new friends.
Yeah.
You being one of many, right?
Yeah.
But that was really a tremendous, I'd say in so many ways, community activity and a great project. And the movie came out later that fall, and we remained friends afterwards, got to know each other. And a lot that you've shared about your personal experience with traumatic brain injury in your family, with your husband, and even prior to that, your sister. So you've got lots to say. And not just what your personal experience. One of the things I really commend you about is you took a personal experience and said, what good can I do with this? And so you started talking about it. And that grew, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how you thought, okay, how can my experience help other people? So we'll dive into it and provide our listeners with a little context to that.
Yeah.
But thanks for coming and sharing again your personal story, and it's great to have you as a good friend on. So
glad to be here.
Yeah. So TBI, traumatic brain injury, as you've learned, has really affects more people than you know.
Oh yeah, there's millions. Somebody could be having one right now in a car accident or a fall. A simple fall could even...
Now, I'm going to ask dumb questions, but just again to provide, okay, traumatic brain injury, it is what it says it is. You have a traumatic brain injury. But what separates a traumatic brain injury from a concussion? Or, I'm in the hospital because I got a concussion. Is that defined as a traumatic brain injury?
It is.
Okay. So, hence the more common, and people probably aren't even aware of it, right?
No, the terminology came to me when my husband fell from a ladder, hit the back of his head on pavement.
The terminology came to you, meaning you knew nothing about this before?
No, did not. I have a degree in developmental disability technology.
Okay. So
I took anatomy physiology, and TBI was not even used back then. It came about in 2008.
Wait.
They started using the terminology
So
of TBI.
Prior to 2008, the term TBI wasn't commonly used?
No.
I never knew that. Okay.
Me either. So I was like,
okay.
So when
was your husband's accident? What year?
2014.
2014. All right. Okay, so let's go back to that, because again, prior you didn't know much about TBI, and then your husband. Tell us about the accident and in the aftermath of that.
His accident. He was a working foreman for.
And your husband's name
is Dan.
Dan. Yeah.
He was a working foreman for West Springfield.
Yeah.
He was greasing the boom, which was one of the things that was to maintain the equipment. Mm-hmm. And he was on a ladder, a huge step ladder. And while he was on it, his foreman Billy was coming up to talk to him about something. And while he was coming down, the safety pin on the ladder popped out, causing the ladder to collapse, and he fell back hit the back of his head.
On what surface?
On a pavement.
Okay.
And also, if a lot of people are not aware, when you have that hit, there's also the brain slapping forward. So he got hit in the back, and he had frontal lobe injury because of the brain slapping back.
The sudden movement forward.
Yeah.
How high was he when he fell?
He was about 6 to 8 feet in the air when he fell.
When you're falling on pavement, it could be 2 feet, honestly, right? I mean,
right.
But okay, so he hit the pavement on his back, but it damaged not only the back but the front.
Right.
Okay.
So if it wasn't for his foreman Billy seeing it happen, where he would have been, he probably wouldn't make it.
So his foreman was right there, and
he ran and got help because he knew somebody in engineering, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
He got Sean, who had experience with head injuries in service, in the service. So he knew enough to keep the head off the ground so it wouldn't collapse, because when you hit hard, the skull cracks. And if the weight of the head is on that pavement.
Yeah, so you have to relieve the pressure
so it doesn't break
if it doesn't
and
catch it.
do.
Yeah. So he knew enough to do that.
Yes.
Could have saved his life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was also Craig, who also helped.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Craig was a friend of ours.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a motorcycle accident, and what he saved my husband from, he died from.
How long after? What happened with that?
It was recently, about 2 or 3 years ago.
2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah.
He died
of
the same type of injury?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because he fell on his...
Oh, that's awful.
So, but I commend them, because if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't be here today.
He wouldn't have made it through.
No.
So they brought him, or did they call an ambulance to bring him to the hospital?
They had to have an ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at the school down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly, I was with one of my students. I was a sped para in a ABA program, which is Applied Behavioral Analysis program for autism. And he had his communication device, which was an iPad. He requested bathroom. So we were walking towards the building, and I heard the sirens. I saw the fire trucks go up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I even said to my student, somebody is in dire straits, not knowing it was for my husband.
Wow. I would imagine soon after you get a phone call.
Yeah. I got into the classroom,
mm-hmm.
and the secretary asked for me to pick up the phone. I picked up the phone. I recognized the voice of our friend Craig, saying that Dan had an accident. He hit his head. All kinds of things were going on through my mind.
Yeah.
Because he has he had a dangerous job.
Mm-hmm.
He goes up 50, 60 feet in the air with a chainsaw cutting trees. Anything could happen.
Yeah, that's pretty dangerous. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So I rushed down, and I left the day, and I remember meeting Craig in the front of the school. He handed me Dan's hat and glasses. And the ambulance was just going with him.
And you're, like you said, all kinds of things are running through your head. Whoa! How did you just probably had to dart right out of there and meet them at the hospital?
I got in my car. I don't know how I got there,
mm-hmm.
but I knew to go to valet parking because I didn't have time to wait. So I get into the hospital, talk to the social worker. She finds out where he is. She brings me I used to be a candy striper. When I was younger, I volunteered at the hospital, trying to see if I wanted to be nursing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I didn't go there.
Didn't go that way. But
So they brought me to what they call is a crying room. It's a separate room. You don't get good news there. So when they brought me to that room,
you knew
it was dire.
Yes. So all the thoughts going through your mind, what in the world, and you had to wait. How long were you there waiting? Before you heard any news,
The social worker stayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like sitting there going, the first thing I said was, I'm not ready to be a widow. And then my kids. I went, oh my God, the kids. So I called.
Were they in school?
They were in school when it happened. And so
and you say kids, just have a son and a daughter.
Yep. Bree was 12, Brian was 10 at the
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
So I had to call someone to meet him at the house to let him in. And it was my sister-in-law. She had to be the bearer of bad news.
And then their kids are going to go, well, what's going on? Where's mom? And what's happening? And so the anxiety starts with that. So you're in the hospital. You were waiting for how long until you had some...
It was about, I would say it seemed forever, but I think it was around 10 minutes.
Oh, but that's a long 10 minutes, yeah. So, and they told you, did he need surgery, or what was the next?
Well, the trauma doctor came in, and he pulled up a chair, grabbed my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is not good.
Oh, yeah, you're waiting. You're bracing yourself. Right?
And so I'm bracing, and he said he suffered a TBI. And that's the first time I heard the word TBI. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And he said, we don't like getting head injuries because we don't know where it's going to go. He could, with a question mark, recover from this. But he didn't know the after facts of it. And I use this explanation of TBI when I do my lives. It's like a computer. Your brain is a computer. It crashes. When it reboots, some of the software comes up 100%, some of it halfway, and some not at all. And that's how he explained it to me, which is very simple.
Yeah, okay.
People can relate to that.
Uh-huh.
So I think I waited about a half hour because they already did a CT scan, but they wanted to send him up for a body scan. But they let me go see him. I remember walking in and seeing him sitting there. As soon as he saw me, tears in his eyes, but he couldn't talk. And I had to reassure him everything was going to be okay, and just let them do what they're going to do. You're going to be fine, just reassuring him, because he was scared. He never had been in a hospital ever in his life.
That's a trauma in itself, if you've never been at that age. So good for him. He was very healthy, obviously, up until then.
He walked every day.
And so now he's there. He's certainly going through a lot of internal anxiety, but probably unclear. Seeing you, had tears, and probably certainly couldn't talk. And you're trying to figure things out. He was in the hospital. Did they have to do anything, meaning like surgery, or just let this heal over time?
They let it heal over time.
How long was he in the hospital for?
He was in the hospital for a week, 2 weeks. Then he went to rehab for another 2 weeks.
Because also, too, his motor skills, right? They were
functioning. Because of my training and my experience working with special needs kids, I had, as I tell people, I wear a wife hat, a mama hat, and a techie hat. So my techie hat went into play. It's hard to tell people when you work with special needs kids, you have a brain that just takes over, and that's what happened. It took over. I was watching his movements, see what was going on. I watched to see if he can look at me. At that time, he could move his arms and legs. He was not verbal, which was concerning to me. So then they took him up for a body scan. It was about a half hour before I saw him again. By that time, his foreman came in, and he was like, thinking, he's going to go home, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, he's in critical condition. And he went, I didn't think it was that bad. But when you think of the brain, it's a gel.
Your brain, you're right, and there's so much uncertainty. It doesn't have to be the way we would think of a trauma. It could be a small hit in the right place, wrong place actually, and say, but so everybody's uncertain. His foreman, yourself, of course, Dan's laying there, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, but he couldn't articulate it and say, even ask you questions. And the doctor told you too, he could recover, but how long and to what degree, and how much of himself will he be? A lot of uncertainty there. That's a lot of a stressful situation. So you had to go home and talk to the kids and say, here's where we're at. That must have been incredibly hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
He ended up suffering a moderate traumatic brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
There's mild, moderate, and severe.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on how long you've been out. They use a glow scale. They do MRI, CT scans, stuff like that to come up where they're at.
Now,
So,
yeah, you had to go through this, and then he eventually came home. He went through therapy.
mm-hmm.
And as this progressed, you saw some improvement?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
some areas. But, talking to the kids to prepare them.
At 12 and 10, that's a tough, okay.
Yeah, well, when they were growing up, you're going to laugh at this. I got this raccoon. My parents bought me. I love raccoons. His name was Robbie.
An alive raccoon?
No,
Okay.
it's a stuffed animal.
Just making sure.
Okay, I should have
I
said something.
pictured it, pet raccoon.
But
Anyway.
Robbie
Yeah.
was my go-to whenever the kids were going through something.
Mm-hmm.
I would take Robbie out, and he would have the same adventures as my kids.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So Robbie came out,
Mm-hmm.
and Robbie's dad got hurt, and that's how I presented it to my kids.
Okay.
And then I give them Robbie, and they tell a story about Robbie's next adventure with
Helping them to talk through it and talk about it. Yeah, okay. That's great. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
how I always
Yeah.
handle things
Mhm.
with them. But this is, my two sister-in-laws were great. They took the kids out to dinner. They kept them, Yeah, they knew Dad was in dire straits.
And you had to put your mom hat on and call it your tech hat as before, trying to figure out this, be your wife, and then, okay, how do I handle the kids? It's a tough thing to do. And Dan comes home,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids recognize he's not quite the same, right? This, what you didn't know then, was going to disrupt your lives for forever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He was not capable of going back to work.
Nope.
Yeah.
And one more blow to his head, he wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Now that was in 2014, so it's been almost 11 years now. How's he doing now? What's changed?
Well, there's a little bit of a regression. He developed hand tremors.
Mm-hmm.
It started in his right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's going into his left and into his feet. He's going to a specialist that deals with tremors. Some TBI survivors do have tremors. It's not unheard of, but there's also other things that could cause the tremor. They checked to see if it was his medication, take him off one seizure medication to another, which was a preventative. Also was helping mood swings.
Mm-hmm.
They found out it's not his medication, so it's something neurological.
So his symptoms, his progression hasn't been a perfect, okay, let's say I got my knee injury, I have my knee replaced, a few months of therapy, and I'm back to where I was.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't that type of progress, because it's as slow and you have regression. There's medication levels that you have to deal with over time. And all this time, you've had to deal with and cope with all of this. In the meantime, your kids are growing up and you're trying to manage the family, right? But you had told me when we talked privately and personally, you said, although it was the first you've heard of TBI and using that term, you said you had experienced something like this earlier in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My older sister. It was one of the worst accidents in Holyoke.
What happened?
In 1967. 11 kids were walking home from school one day, and an elderly woman had a medical emergency behind the wheel of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of hitting the brakes, she hit the gas and hit all 11.
Oh.
3 died that day. The 4th died a few days later. One of them was our neighbor's daughter, and my sister was the severest to survive. She suffered a severe head injury. She was in a coma for 10 days. She had over 100 stitches in her head alone.
She was how old?
She was 7.
7.
Almost 7.
Okay.
So she was temporarily paralyzed on her left side. So she had to relearn everything, had to do everything all over. Luckily, we lived with my grandparents. We lived upstairs. We lived downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandparents ended up at night taking me because my mother was busy with my older sister, obviously. I remember Reverend Johnson used to come in. We were his special family. He would come and pray. There was a special ed teacher, Ann Battersby, who, God bless her soul, I remember meeting her, and I think she was part of the direction I was going in, along with my sister,
Mm-hmm.
who was my inspiration
Mm-hmm.
to work with special needs kids.
Wow. So from there, it brought you to your line of work at the time, and without realizing it, it in some way prepared you to deal with Dan's injury, right?
Things happen for a reason, so it became a full circle.
That was in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
All those years, how's your sister doing?
She's married.
Mm-hmm.
She has 2 beautiful daughters. She has 7 grandkids.
Wow.
So she's tried to live as normal as possible, but now she has a pacemaker. Her memory's kind of not so good, but...
So throughout her life, after the initial trauma
Mm-hmm.
and the therapy and relearning things, it still had an effect on her all those years. And now, I'm assuming she's close to your age. So, but yeah, she's 7 grandkids and kids and everything, lived a full life, but there's still the effects. Don't go away. Yeah. So, with your experience with Dan and your sister, you started to talk about this publicly. Just you, when you started. I mean, what brought you? I mean, we're going to get into what you're doing now, but what started it, and when was your first time when you said, "Hey, I've got to talk to other people about this"?
Well, while he was recovering
Yeah.
in the hospital,
Yeah.
I started, what is TBI?
Mm-hmm.
So I started researching.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept looking into this, and then it brought me to this. And I'm like, you know what? I should do something about this. Other people might use this. But prior to this, I had a website for cancer,
Okay.
Embrace Serenity.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to research and put articles up.
Okay.
So I'm like, I could probably do something like that.
Okay. Just
So-
on your own, right?
Yep,
Just
on
by
my
yourself.
own.
Yeah.
So I started making these it's actually slides. I would research something and cut it down to, the longest I have are 16 minutes, and the reason why is if somebody has a TBI, they don't have a long attention span,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's too much information, they're not going to grasp it and understand it. So keeping that in mind, all my slides are to the point.
Short, concise, and right
And
there.
right
Yeah,
there.
Yeah,
Sometimes my brain goes there.
Which
so.
we could all use more of anyway, but yeah.
And keep it simple.
Yeah.
Because you don't need and it, those little
You
words.
just, yeah.
So I ended up doing like 6 or 7 info videos on YouTube.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, nobody's seeing this, so I need to do something more.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, Understanding Traumatic Brain Injury, TBI group on Facebook started.
You started a group, Understanding TBI in a group, and the group started off with you, just
Mhm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got some responses, you've got some replies and attention. What was happening then, and what did you hear back from people?
As time went on, people started joining. There was one TBI organization, I can't remember which it was. It was like September in 2022. They joined, and my group exploded. Now we have 5.9K and still growing.
Almost 6,000 people, and you just started it a short time ago.
2015.
15. Okay, well, 15.
A year after Dan.
A year after Dan, you started it, but it started off slow, and then now it's grown to 6,000 people. what did most of those people? I thought I turned my phone off. Can you imagine that? Most of those people. What were their responses? How did they? What was the reason for them to engage with you?
Well, when I have like simple questions, are you a survivor? Are you a caregiver? Tell me about your accident.
Mm-hmm.
And to tell you the truth, I read those, and I get emotional. And then when they join, and I usually find articles, I share articles with them, information. I usually tell them go to my YouTube channel. If they have a family member that doesn't understand TBI, there is one info video that I did. It's called My Silent Rage. Is a poem that I wrote after my husband came home, what he was going through. They change, personality change. And I tell people this, you go through a mourning part because you're mourning the loss of what the person was in order to accept what is.
You have to go through that process.
Yes, and it's brutal. It's not easy because you expect that person to be the same person that walked out that door that day of the accident. When you get them back, they're nowhere. They're sometimes opposite of who they were.
In other words, a stranger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going through that. The survivor's going through that, and they just want people to say, I'm the same person, but I'm not the same person. And understanding traumatic brain injury brought so many people together that they're reaching out and helping each other. Hey, I had this experience. Did you experience it? They're reaching out. They're helping each other. And then there were some like, I can't talk in public because I'm not comfortable. So I started 4 different chats so that they can talk to one another off the grid of the world.
Right. Without being public.
Right.
Privately,
and now Facebook has an anonymous, so they can post anonymously. Only I can see who's doing it. And I would never share that because they're doing it purposely. Mm. A lot of them have thanked me for having the group. Several people will message me, thanking me because I've helped them. One girl, her family didn't understand, and they drifted apart. And I said, show them my videos. So she shared the videos with them, and it actually brought her family back to her.
Wow. Because
they didn't understand.
Not understanding, obviously, is people make decisions, and if they don't understand, they don't know how to react, how to deal with this. But knowing what you're sharing with people brings people, obviously, that's the whole point. It's called understanding TBI for a reason. And I think that's what you're trying to convey here, right, with people. So is there if somebody wanted to find out more, right, is there a website, a YouTube channel? How do they?
They can find me on Facebook. It's called Understanding Traumatic Brain Injury, TBI. And on that, I also have a hyperlink for my YouTube channel, which is Sue Dexter, Understanding TBI. And I have all my lives there. I've had people come on that most of them have been authors. Some of these people wrote books about their experiences.
And you've had some pretty, say, higher profile guests on, too.
Paul Phrase is a former football player. He came on. He is, his mission is to make people aware of CTE, which goes hand in hand with TBI.
What is CTE?
CTE is repetitive hitting of the head, like football players will have.
Boxers, right?
Boxers. Unfortunately.
Husbands.
Yeah. Wives.
Right. All right.
So the only thing is to find out if somebody has CTE, they need more study before they're dead. Because in order for them to understand, somebody has to be unalived.
So you're getting your exposure to understanding TBI is reaching people. I mean, you get to, Paul Fraze contacted you out of the blue, and you said, "Well,
actually, I contacted him.
How did that happen?"
He joined as a member,
Mm-hmm.
and he was showing videos, and I'm like, it's very informative, because I had some sports people that had joined
Mm-hmm.
my group, and I'm like, I should do something.
Right.
But I didn't know who he was, really. Even though I watch a lot of football, it didn't connect. So I asked him if he would be on my live, and he said yes. And, I wanted to have him on to spread his mission, too, of getting the education, understanding. Yeah. So as I did that, I researched and I realized who he was. I went, oh, my goodness. Mm. So...
See, that's great. You are reaching people with this and sharing the information. And I think when you have a shared experience, whether it's with TBI or addiction, and people will open up because, oh my gosh, this is great. I have someone who can understand, someone who can I can relate to, someone who will be empathetic to this and understand when I talk about this, because often people don't unless you experience it yourself. Mm-hmm. And the sooner you can talk about how you cope with it, how does it impacts your family, I think that just goes such a long way. And then it doesn't go away. No. Meaning that TBI isn't just done after 30 days or a year. No. It stays with you forever. Even if you may regress, as you explained earlier, or have memory losses. There's always something to think about, unlike other injuries like this. And you hear a lot about football players, obviously, with the concussions, which are, like you said, that is a TBI in itself. But there's more people, I think, when we've said a lot, I can't believe how many people have had to deal with this and didn't know how to cope with it, how to deal with it, who to talk to. But you're opening up a lot of people. And from this group that's growing now, 6,000 strong, you've had all kinds of people who are now maybe more open to talking about it.
Yeah.
And even starting their own groups.
Yeah,
or groups within the group, right?
Well, there's been a few that I've noticed have started their own groups. Yeah. Which I think is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
They invited me to join that. Of course, I'm going to join.
Yeah.
There's my life has been a full circle, and I tell people what you learn in that full circle, you bring forth to help those understand and not feel alone.
That's important. That's huge. It's huge. And when you feel alone, certainly a lot of things come from that. Addiction, depression, all kinds of things. And your family may have to go through therapy because you say, how do we cope with this? How do we deal with this? And often when you see it with addiction too, and also TBI in itself, not only with the person affected, but family members that go through the stress of it. You see that a lot, that it does lead to addictive behavior?
Yeah. There's been some of my members that have admitted to going into addiction because of the depression of nobody understanding them and them not understanding themselves, because you figure you wake up in a hospital, somebody's telling you have a head injury. We told my husband, I don't know how many times, you had a head injury. You keep telling him. He didn't realize until...
Didn't register. Yeah.
It didn't register until more of his brain came down. I mean, they talked of putting a shunt to get the blood out of his brain and stuff like that. But he never had to have that surgery because the brain absorbed the blood itself.
Okay.
Which I was like, wow, that's cool in a way when you think of it.
Well, body's amazing.
Yes, it is. Yeah. He did have to have a feeding tube. Because he just wasn't eating, like getting the nutrition that he needed. But other than that, he was pretty much lucky. He's seen about 7 neurologists, and they look at his MRI and look at him and say, you're a walking miracle.
Wow.
Which implied another poem, and I did a project.
You wrote a few poems.
Yeah.
They're good, and I did see it. You put one on Facebook and you put it to music. It was beautiful. I remember seeing it. I'm like, wow. And then I said, what a beautiful song, beautiful music, beautiful images. And then later I read, oh, this is a poem I wrote. I said, what? Sue wrote this poem. It was amazing. Yeah.
I was sitting there one day and I was looking at my husband and I'm like, you've come a long way.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of all these neurologists are saying, he's a walking miracle. They don't even know how the type of injury he had. They had to intubate him sooner than later because the injury of his brain was controlling breathing.
Okay.
And that's when it became real, was when they intubated him. This was really happening. And
how soon after when he was in the hospital? How long was it?
It was hours.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was probably the early morning. The next day, actually, I think.
Through all that intense, the initial accident and all that was pretty intense. And when he finally came home and just started this journey that now is 11 years in, you said he came a long way, which he has. You have come a long way, too. And your children, who are now, Bree is what, 21? She's
20. No, she's 22. My son's 20. He's going to be 21.
Oh, yeah. Well, don't forget that.
I can't. He won't let me.
No, but everybody as a family, you've come a long way because
Yeah.
you've learned how to cope and deal with it. Besides that, you've come a long way in being able to talk and educate through your program that's ongoing, and people are still joining and learning more and thanking you, because I know we talked about it. They say, oh my gosh, thank you for just relating to me and helping me understand this. And now our family maybe just, we talk about this a lot with addiction, and a lot of families who don't know, they don't know what they don't know, and therefore often make decisions with what leads to unintended consequences, right? And may run counter to what other advisors might say. People in the field say, oh no, that decision, and people do make wrong decisions when they're uninformed. That's the point. You're helping people to understand more, make better decisions, learn how to cope, and remain as family, and hopefully avoid those unintended consequences, maybe avoid something leading to addiction or further health issues. I think I commend you on that. That's tremendous. And you've done this before, though, with the cancer and everything else, so I know you've done it, and you've lived enough through both your sister and your husband. How's Dan doing today?
Yeah, with the hand tremors and stuff, we're still getting to the bottom of it,
Yeah.
There's really no aftercare.
It's on you.
Yeah. It's up to the caregivers. And caregivers are a very important, intricate part of this. They're the advocate. They're the ones that, have to dealing with the specialist. And I've had quite a few that were like with an attitude, and I'm a veteran of this now, so I'm like, yeah, you didn't go there. And so I usually let them know what I know.
Now you're in a position to do that.
Yes.
You wouldn't do this 10 years ago.
I wouldn't know where to begin.
You wouldn't know where to begin. And again, it because you've learned so much, you can share the real stories, and you can really relate now and get through all the messy stuff, right, with people. Well, it's great work you're doing. So if people want to learn more, again, we said it, but let's just say it again. How do they find you?
They find me on Facebook, Understanding Traumatic Brain Injury, TBI. And on YouTube, I have Sue Dexter, Understanding TBI.
Okay. Well, I recommend people look, because, again, there's more people who have experienced TBI, and maybe they just don't know it, or see the symptoms and say, yeah, I didn't know this might have been a TBI, but they experienced the symptoms themselves or with a family member. And again, it could be through so many ways. Sports injury, car accidents, or any type of injury like what your husband went through. I again commend you what you're dealing with personally and reaching out to people.
They're my therapy.
They well,
they are my therapy. I learn
See?
from them as
Yeah.
they learn from me.
Yeah, that's the way it
And
has got to work.
that's why I did my project, to honor the survivors,
Yeah,
because they are walking miracles.
and we advocate a lot. Talk about it, open up. The more you talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
The more likely you are to find people experiencing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about this, people say, "Hey, yeah, you do. What's this?" I say, "I do a podcast. We talk about addiction. We talk about recovery and topics like this, mental health." Oh, wow! I didn't know that. By the way, I have a friend, a family member, and
Mm-hmm.
we've experienced this too. I said, "Wow, I never would have known that.
Mm-hmm.
I would never have known that." But just the mere fact that we've talked about it,
Mm-hmm.
people start to open up and share experiences. They share it more freely when they know you relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, well, Sue, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's great information. And so everybody else, thanks for listening. And again, if you want to learn more, go Understanding TBI, Facebook, and Sue Dexter, Understanding TBI on YouTube. And also visit our website, healingvoicesproject.org. We are a non-profit, and certainly we like to depend on support from people to keep our program going. Thank you, Sue, and thanks for listening. See y'all later. All right.